Hey guys, Thomas this is Junior here, aka Mustached. I'm here to do another retrospective review. Last time we covered Digimon Season 1, so it's about time to slide on over to Digimon Season 2. And, of course, this is a retrospective review, so this is going back to the good old days and reviewing it as objectively as possible. That means trying to pick apart any things that I might have tried to improve on, things that were really good, all that good stuff. So, with that being said, let's dive right into it. And if you also enjoy this retrospective review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord. The first will head you over to my petition, second, third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel, and fourth to my Discord, and shilling will be reminded at the end of this review. With all that out of the way, let's get into the retrospective for Digimon Season 2. So what I find quite remarkable, just a end cap of what I can recall from what I rewatched of Digimon Season 1, is that its bittersweet ending still hits pretty hard despite its cheeky music, and it really just felt like, even with a Season 2, even knowing meta-wise, it's still a bittersweet ending. And with that being said, Digimon Season 2 did a lot of things in the regard of taking a lot of risk. This would become a staple for Digimon specifically, that it would, in each iteration, aka seasons of Digimon, would be different from one another, just like how Digimon, the world games, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are all slightly different versions of games. They're not quite like one another. There's like a gimmick to one, and then there's a slightly different gimmick if they're still RPGs. Point being is that they still inhabit these slightly different qualities from one another, and that is no different from here in the Season 2. And in light of that, we have the passing of the torch to our new tamers and to returning tamers. The newer tamers containing of Davis, Yoli, and Cody, and later on Ken, and their vintage and aged up versions of TK and Kari from Season 1, now aged up slightly here. And we do see quite a few adventures from our Season 1 guys just to properly pass that torch down, but that doesn't happen until a little bit later on in the show. But speaking of other things that this changes from also Season 1 is the introduction to Fusion Evolution. This is when two of the Digimon fuse into one bigger, better Digimon. And this sort of new gimmick would come back, and there'd be newer gimmicks in the future, and we'll talk about those as we get to them. So Fusion is, of course, you can think of it sort of like the Dragon Ball Z Fusion dance, except, it's the typical Digimon sort of style of, it takes a bit of time away from the show. That's something I did not discuss even remotely in Season 1. I should have, because that is something I wish would have also been improved upon, is that the Digivolutions, especially towards the beginning of each season, is usually the slower end, and then they usually try to heighten the speeds of them by having the kids do their Digivolution things together, and gimmicks like that. But as for now, as we're starting off, that is not quite there yet. One thing I do appreciate about one of the movies, I don't remember which one it was, is that during the Digivolution, instead of showing the whole process, it would still be in the sort of live or the action space, and the Digimon would digivolve within the battle sequence, and I thought that was a way a way better way of handling Digivolution, and I wish that overall they would have slid over to that a lot sooner, because quite frankly I do think that that's a significantly better way just to do Digivolution. Anyway, enough about that for now. So the other and third change is that the humans have not faced another human antagonist prior to in Digimon Season 1, and that is, of course, what I'm talking about in Ken, who, again, as I just mentioned, later on joins them. But for now, in the earlier parts, he is known as the Digimon Emperor, and is utilizing Digimon and these dark spiral thingamabobs to like possess Digimon and make him do his bidding. Now, we later learn on that apparently he was tricked by two others into thinking that this was a good way about doing things, and that he also thought that this world, in touch with the theme of overall of Digimon in its entirety, is that the Digimon are more than just their data. They're just more than just ones and zeros. They're living creatures, as the show and shows of Digimon have gone on to go on about, as we'll see. But Ken is in denial of that, at least as the Digimon Emperor, and it is up to our tamers to find their initial, like, little new armor Digivolutions, which is another new gimmick. Each Digimon has at least two. In the case of Patamon and Gatomon, they only have one respective, and the others have, and the other new guys except Wormmon also have another additional one. So we get a bunch of new side evolutions and armor Digivolutions and fusion Digivolutions. It's just expanding upon the way in which Digimon can get stronger, essentially, is the gist of this. So, what I do appreciate about Season 1 is that it is comprised of both sort of fighting Ken while also simultaneously doing a just talk at him. And I could say this as, and I've mentioned this before, like an early pre-Zuko era, like, redemption arc. The difference here being is that you learn about Ken's backstory significantly earlier here, and why he's doing what he's doing, at least sort of how he got to be the Digimon Emperor, and we could see that he's that human that Ken pretty early on as well. So there aren't many surprises in that regard. So yeah, I would also mention that I would argue that this is a more condensed version. It's significantly shorter than, say, Zuko's redemption story, and I do mention Zuko because I know a lot of people like to mention that he has, like, one of the best redemption arcs in history, like, in, like, cartoon history, and it's like, well, he's not the first. Ken, as I mentioned, is a bit more condensed here, and there is, like, a backstory to it. So you can see the meanness and cruelty from Ken, definitely in hurting Wormmon and even kicking a puppy, so you know that they were trying to be like, ooh, we're gonna make you hate this guy at first, really, really bad. And then, of course, we had our Digivolutions and changes. We even have Vmon having a third armored thing, which turns him into Magnamon, which is like near the end tail of Ken's arc here. We don't have any of our current Digimon in this one, particularly going evil. And when I say that is like in Digimon Season 1, you had Agumon turn into Skull Greymon as an example. So none of our protagonists ever reach that specific journey here. Instead, what we are replaced with that with is a Black War Greymon, which is a Digimon that is created from various Dark Spires, and this is after Ken has been redeemed. And moving on to the arc, the second arc, which also involves Mamemon and Arukanimon, this spider-looking Digimon and this mummy-looking Digimon. And of course, as I just mentioned, Black War Greymon being created by those two, by various of Ken's made Dark Spires, approximately, I believe they said 100 of them, or probably even more. And so, that creates a whole disconnect of like what he's trying to be. He kind of loses his purpose pretty quickly after doing some pretty big damage early on. And we have some interesting moments here with Black War Greymon. Honestly, I think, because in Season 2, it does, and this is going into the meta of it in retrospect fashion, it is very clear, and I've seen other videos also mention this, in that Season 2 had a lot more behind the scenes, like hell production things going on in the making of Digimon Season 2, which sort of made this a bit messier to sort of compile into this full show. But despite that, I think they did a properly decent job. All setbacks aside. Now, Digimon has always been known for its darker themes, and I mention this specifically at Arikenimon's and Mamemon's arc. Specifically, Ken's arc does deal with potential, you could suggest mayhaps he was very close on the edge of precipice, as it were, to, say, committing suicide. But then finds himself, and Wormmon is also there to help him through that stage. But that is not the only light, and that's suggested, that's not like a hard read of that's something that they specifically set out and say in the show, obviously. But that is not the case with Mamemon and Arukanimon, with what they do. Not quite, obviously, in the framework of the same thing, but we do have some kid trafficking to deal with in this season. They do abduct a bunch of kids along with oh boy, I'm gonna forget his name, even though I just watched this not too long ago. He's like this tall gray dude who like knows Cody's dad, and this guy is like, I'll just call him Gray Dude. So Gray Dude is like a new antagonist that is actually just Myotismon taking over him due to darkness. So we actually have a returning villain from Season 1, which is sort of ushering us into the third arc between 2 and 3. And of course you can sort of see the messiness. Now, one thing I do appreciate about Season 2 beyond its newer gimmicks and so on and so forth is the expansion of the whole thing about being so-called Digi-destined. In this case, they expand that by allowing other kids that aren't our main characters to start becoming Digimon tamers. This happens pretty late in the show, pretty much during our final arc here. in dealing with the remnants of Mamemon and Arikanimon and Gray Man here, Evil Gray Man, aka Myotismon. So it's up to all the teamers across the world now, but primarily led by our main crew, sort of jetting around the world in Vmon and Wormmon's DNA Digivolution in Imperialmon fighter mode. So this allows them to gain access to the skies and pretty much explode into the distance and make great deals of travel and expand the Digimon roster by quite a wide margin of kids and their Digimon, which again, I am greatly appreciative of new tamers being the sort of the course, and I do think that that does sort of play into where we see coming into Digimon Season 3, among other things, but we'll get to that in that retrospective review, which will be the next one I do at some point. But for now, I will say that this particular set of Digimon tamers is quite exceptional. Vmon now being my new favorite Digimon, if I can't explicitly keep the same from Season 1, which my favorite from Season 1 would have been Gatomon, due to her backstory. Vmon would be my second pick, which also leads me to talk about my favorite/least favorite episode of Digimon simultaneously. It happens to be the same episode. It is my favorite for the implication, it is my least favorite because they do nothing with it, is the gist of this. So, in Digimon Season 2, our main character, Davis, has a crush on Kairi. And this is known pretty much right out of the gate, pretty early on in the introduction episode, and is maintained throughout while also getting jealous of TK, and also, at least in the sub, him always mispronouncing the name. But anyways, there's this one episode where he's getting really, really jealous and envious, and he wants Vmon to digivolve, essentially, so that he can impress Kairi through that. For some reason, that is the conclusion he gets to. And this sort of romantic, quarrel, I guess I'll call it, between these two sort of bounces off onto Vmon at the very least, as you see Vmon, from being told by Davis that he can have an opportunity with Gatomon, that being Kairi's partner, and Vmon starts to sort of daydream about romantic dancing with Gatomon. And again, the interesting element of that, and why I find that so fascinating, is that I do think that this hits on, again, the bigger theme of Digimon, and, Digimon's ability to love one another, perhaps, is a part, I think, would be a part of that equation. So I was really, initially, when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, they're actually going to do something. And, I was a kid, I liked the little romance stuff really, really well. And in retrospect, they don't really do anything with it, as I just mentioned. So there is that to the unfortunate end of the shtick. As for our other characters, we have Yoli, who actually also has quite the romantic feelings for Ken, actually also pretty early on. That's actually also made pretty evident before she even knows he is the Digimon Emperor. And we have little bits and bobs between her having, little side crushes, but as we'll see at the end tale of Digimon, where they actually do a time skip, and we're going to talk about the time skip for a huge chunk of this, as we'll get to that pretty soon. Because there's another thing with that too. And we have Cody, who has he's sort of our new insert youngest character here, but he also has he's not quite as much of a fraidy cat as TK was in season 1, well, with the exception of when it comes to water, as we see that he has a fear of water, and then they do this whole armored digivolution with Armadillomon and that whole bit there. And speaking of, in sort of backtracking to that meta sense, is that sometimes between episodes, sometimes they'll just be in that particular episode, they're just like in the situation all of a sudden. So there are bits and bobs here that are a little bit more disconnected, even on those little bits, and they try to make it fit as much as conceivably possible, as I just mentioned. And of course, there is Ken, who was, as I've been alluding to throughout, has been the Digimon Emperor, and has to come to terms with all the evil deeds that he has done while being the Digimon Emperor, and asking forgiveness from Wormmon and the others, and getting that eventually, actually pretty soon, as I mentioned, because the condensity of it, only by comparison to, say, other redemption arcs anyway. And yeah, that pretty much rounds out our newer tamers, and TK and Kairi are just slightly older. We have Kairi having more of these Digimon Queen moments, as I call them now. She's like this consistent gateway from Season 1 to Season 2 of this connection to the Digimon directly, and that maintains here in Season 2 to a different capacity, but still generally the same. There is this like third mid-dimension, this dark ocean that they visit throughout, and that leads to a thing that has I think it was either resolved in a movie or has yet to be resolved. I forget which it is at this point, because of how much Digimon content there is now. Well, regardless of that, and moving on. So yeah, the arcs are fascinating. We have Kinemon and Mamemon aren't particularly... They're sort of like the Edamon, except with the whole child abduction thing. That's where they get like, oh, we're going into the dark stuff now with them. Oh, okay. Sort of that attitude sort of carries on again. And some weird gimmicks with them, like they enter like this big house, and again, dealing with just, I think they're trying to make the digital world here a little bit more wonky and creative, I suppose, while again it also being a little bit messy too, on top of all that. So yeah, not the, sort of the midpoint, and then Black War Greymon sort of makes things interesting again, and Grey Dude, aka Myotismon, the returning of Myotismon, and having all the tamers, all the warriors, have to gain up on the Digivolution, the Myotismon, or Venom, or whatever version of Myotismon it turns into. I forget explicitly which one, but anyway. So yeah, as I was mentioning at some point, there is a time skip at the final episode, and this has led to some complications, considering that there's Digimon Tri now, and trying to lead in that direction. We have relationships being established, like between Sora and Matt here in Season 2, establishing that. We have a flash forward to when they're all adults, all of the people from both Season 1 and 2, and we have certain groups of individuals, like, for example, Ty from Season 1 becoming, like, an ambassador to, like, this, and Agumon being ambassadors between Digimon and humans. Since the world was connected at this, the two worlds were connected at this point. We have Matt, which was the one that sort of ruined a lot of, sort of, because they had this whole thing during the show, at least in Season 2, that he's like this rock star, and all of a sudden in the flash forward, he's like in space on the moon for some reason. He's with Gabumon. It's like, okay. That one's a bit bizarre. Yoli does end up with Ken married officially, capacity. It's mentioned in the dialogue, so that's canonized. But all them now adults have kids, so they all had to get in certain relationships in one way or another. And you have all the Digimon running with the smaller versions of the Digimon in the sort of final frame of the shot. That being, you see the youth running with the new or old Digimon. I forget which pair it is, but yeah, I think it's the younger ones. In the final frame of Digimon Season 2. So yeah, slightly, from a meta sense, a little bit trickier, apparently. But I think, overall, I would say, yeah, Season 2 also holds up pretty decently, all things considered. All the mess aside. And I appreciate sort of the maintaining of the darker themes, as I mentioned, and the darker implications of Digimon that have been going on, and will continue to do that as I move forward, eventually towards Digimon Season 3, and the retrospective for that. AKA the best season of Digimon for a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people. Digimon Season 3 is like, they took it to a new level despite the clear, and I mean crystal clear, and I'll even mention it again during the video, merchandise like opportunities, and it's like, well, they did it. They really went all out on it. They did not hold back on Digimon Season 3. Unlike Season 2, I will say this now, it managed to maintain a pretty consistent through line, or the arcs felt like they were very much a tighter thread, as it were, than even either Season 1 or 2 combined. We'll be talking a lot about that later in that part. But for now, this is a little bit shorter, because I had a little less to say about Season 2 than 1. And I suspect that this will be sort of the amount of time and space I'll be trying to achieve throughout these newer retrospectives for 3 and onward, until we are caught up to the most current Digimon season, which would be, in this case, Digimon Ghost Game, in which then I'll finally review that, because they haven't actually ever reviewed it even the once. So, if you ended up enjoying this review, as of now, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One, I'll head over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third, to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel directly. And fourth, to my Discord server. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.